Today, we are breaking out the free agency grades, and we're going to give a grade for all of the Chargers' biggest moves so far, like J.C. Jackson and Sebastian Joseph Day. We'll also get into a trade grade for Khalil Mack, but I'm also going to tell you guys why the J.C. Jackson grade is a full-blown A+.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together for over 6 seasons, and we've been doing the Locked On Chargers podcast for 5 seasons now, bringing you your team every day. What's up, guys? Thanks for making us your first listen today. We always appreciate you guys, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and also follow the show for free on all platforms, wherever you get your podcast from. But David, I think I wanted to do something fun today, so we wanted to break out the free agency grades with the biggest signing coming yesterday was the signing of the Chargers punter, which we'll get into, but I guess it's not just free agency grades because we're going to be talking about the Khalil Mack trade as well and putting a grade on that because we haven't done that yet. But we want to really get into all the biggest moves of the offseason so far, so we're going to start with J.C. Jackson and tell you why I'm so in love with that move, bringing in Khalil Mack. Then we'll get into guys like Sebastian Joseph Day, re-signing Mike Williams and the grade we put on that, before getting into the end of the show and talking about Gerald Everett, the last biggest name brought in by the Chargers, and also the special teams guys and what we make of those. We'll do a little rapid round there. Talk about J.K. Scott, the Chargers' new punter, and what we think about that. But today's episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them that Locked On sent you. All right, David, well, it's time to get into some free agency grades, and I know Khalil Mack is not a free agency pickup, but how do you go do a show like this without talking about that? And we haven't put a grade on it yet. Well, let's be honest, free agency grades, offseason grades, they're fun, and I wanted to get into it. So, David, I guess I already kind of gave my grade on J.C. Jackson, but I think it is the biggest free agency move, obviously, by the Chargers. One of the biggest ones I think they've ever really made, honestly, bringing in a guy of his caliber, one of the best veteran, all-pro players that we've ever seen them bring in. So when you're looking at grading him specifically for the Chargers in free agency, what grade would you put on it?
Yeah, I mean, looking at this move and understanding why the Chargers had to go out and make this move, it's very simple to me. Go out and look at all of the incredible wide receiver talent that is up and down the AFC West. You have the Chiefs with Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman, Travis Kelce. You have the Broncos with Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Tim Patrick, and the slew of young wide receivers they have there. And then, oh, by the way, the Raiders just went ahead and traded for one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, Davante Adams. And now the Chargers can say that they confidently have one of the top 5 corners in all of football that play for their team. And they got him for 5 seasons on a very reasonable contract. And you consider everything this man brings to the table, I don't think that you can't look at this in any other way than giving this move an absolute automatic A+. It just has to happen. You really give yourself the cachet on the defensive side to be able to compete and be able to lock down one of the most nasty divisions in football.
Yeah, well, and I think, the fit matters, right? Because,
Yes.
there are a lot of really great corners, but not all of the great corners in the league would fit what the Chargers want to do as well as J.C. Jackson would, right? And obviously, you're talking about an all-pro player who's led the NFL in interceptions since 2018. According to PFF, he has the second lowest completion percentage allowed since 2018. So the dude has done it all. It's hard to complete passes against him, and it's hard when you throw it his way not to have the ball going the other way and having him now put it back in Justin Herbert's hands. But I do think that, if he had gone to the Jaguars, right, something like that, I wouldn't be giving it as high of a grade because it doesn't take them to another level, right? This does something for Brandon Staley and his defense specifically that unlocks, I think, a lot of what the other guys do well and just brings the Chargers to a different level. And obviously for the Chargers, getting a player of that caliber and getting him at that price, because I've seen people say they overpaid for him, and I've also seen people say that it's one of the better contracts you're going to see in free agency. He is the 6th highest paid corner right now, so he didn't set a new market. There's corners making $20+ million per season, he comes in at $16.5 million. I think that's super reasonable. And I think it's a guy coming in at that age specifically. You're getting a young man in his prime. You're not getting a 30-plus-year-old guy you're hoping can continue that production. You're getting a dude who should just now be hitting his stride, and you're, pairing him with Brandon Staley. And seeing that all-in clip, I retweeted on my Twitter at Dan Talk Sports, and seeing just the list of things that Brandon Staley loves about that dude, I think really kind of says it all, right? But to me, A-plus grade. It's a great fit. I thought it was a great deal, even though it wasn't super cheap. I still think that's quite a deal for the Chargers, being able to potentially keep that guy locked up for the next 5 seasons.
Well, and it was the guy we always wanted all along. So it's just
he was
so
our number
nice.
one free agent target.
Yes, he was the number one guy, and there was so many reports out there. Yeah, and it was like, oh, there's way too many reports out there. The Chargers they're too tight-lipped. There's no way this was going to happen. Well, guess what? It happened, and I am so happy that it did.
And obviously it's risky, right? But at the same time, there's not a crazy amount of dead cap after year 3.
Risk, no reward, Daniel.
Exactly. When it also showed an urgency. And that's why I wanted to include the Khalil Mack trade in this grading as well, because it showed the urgency of the Chargers going all in. I don't think it was in response to the Denver, Broncos trading for Russell Wilson. I think the Chargers were planning on doing this and trying to capitalize on Justin Herbert's rookie contract, which is all we've wanted for them. So, David, when you're looking at the trade part of this, Khalil Mack sending a 2nd-round pick in 2022, sending a 6th-round pick in 2023, and getting the player that you have for the contract he has, what would you give a grade on that trade?
Yeah, so looking at this trade, something that's monumental, something that has never even come close to happening at this scale as long as Tom Telesco has been the general manager of the Chargers. Just the move, just by itself on the surface, is already exciting and already giving it plus points, because it's just not something you would have ever seen or ever expected that the Chargers would make a move like this. So that right there is already worth some credit. But then you consider the player that you're bringing in, a former defensive player of the year, a guy that has 76 sacks. Oh, and by the way, what he's going to do for this man right here, the guy who used to wear 99, Joey Bosa, is just going to open up so much. And for everyone on the defense, this is a transcendent type of talent, a type of player that is going to be phenomenal against the run, phenomenal as a pass rusher, no matter what you ask him to do. And it's going to not allow them to double team Joey Bosa. It's going to open things up for those linebackers that are going to be flowing behind him. It's going to make the corners better because they're not going to have to cover as long. This is a move that makes every single component of your defense better. So with that being said, the only reason I can't give it an absolute A+ is because of the little bit of injury concern that we had with the foot last year. That's the only reason why, for me, it's an A-.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, for me, I gave it a solid A, and I think it's the injury, obviously, last year. He hasn't had, 10-plus sacks in a few seasons, but I'm really not worried about that at all. No. But I do think, the benefit outweighs the risk. I think, the reward so much outweighs the risk in this scenario because, David, look at last year, sacks by 30-plus-year-old players, right? For those saying he's too old. Robert Quinn, 18.5 at 31. Chandler Jones, 32, 10.5 sacks. Marcus Golden, 31, 11 sacks. Cam Jordan, 12.5 sacks at 32. Von Miller, 9.5 sacks. At a different position, you have Cam Hayward and Aaron Donald both doing it over the age of 30. And that's one thing about this is guys, especially pass rushers, can continue to produce after the age of 30. And I think that both of those dudes could go for double-digit sacks next year. I think Mack and Bosa could both easily eclipse 10. And I think with Brandon Staley, the most exciting part of it and why it gets an A is just this should, at this point, unlock things in this defense we just weren't able to see last year with the combination of him and J.C. Jackson. I think the grade also reflects bringing both of those guys in because just Khalil Mack wasn't going to be enough.
And keeping your 1st-round pick, too. That's another thing. You got him for a 2nd-round pick and a 6th-round pick next season. So that compensation for the player that you're bringing in, it's almost a joke that they were able to bring him in for that.
Yeah.
Because this is a player, when he's healthy, when he's right, I think is unquestionably worth a 1st-round pick plus. So I think the value, just looking at it from that perspective, it's very, very strong for the Chargers.
Well, the riskiest part, David, is just how much money, right? Because it's going to be, high 20s as far as what he's going to be paid in cap hits the next couple of seasons
$27 million plus the next 2 seasons after this year.
But it's kind of risk-free. I mean, because you have Justin Herbert on his rookie contract, but you can also get out of it for very, very little dead cap as well if it totally blows up, and I just can't see that happening. So I think it's really going to pay off for the Chargers, and I really love that move because, I mean, out of all the guys I've listed, maybe you put Von Miller there. Obviously not Aaron Donald at a different position, but, like, Khalil Mack is good or better than all of those dudes, and I'd say better than all of those dudes, especially with what he's able to do against the run. But there are more players, and I think the other big deal that was talked about even more than J.C. Jackson and Khalil Mack was Mike Williams, because the Chargers had to really kind of make a risky move there based on 1 year of production with Mike Williams, giving him a 3-year, $60 million contract. So we're going to talk about him, Austin Johnson, and also Sebastian Joseph Day, and put some grades on those coming up right after this. But speaking of spending a lot of money, I have been putting a lot of money down on March Madness and watching a ton of basketball, and the only place I put my money is at betonline.net, because it's that time of year again as college basketball's tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, betonline.net is the #1 source for all of your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And you can do live in-game betting, which I really love as well. Turn your fade around, especially during all the craziness of these games and just having so many games. And when you don't know the teams that are playing on TV, it's a lot funner when you have some action riding on it. But it's not just basketball. BetOnline has you covered with, live betting odds everywhere, and your favorite Vegas casino games even, to go along with boxing, UFC, and all the other great things that you can bet on. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action at BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, David, we're continuing to get into our free agency / off-season grades, I guess, and to see how other teams are feeling about that and to feel better about the Chargers moves, you can go to Locked On NFL, and they can tell you why the Chargers are the best team so far at, in free agency, and they're getting, very high grades from all the places. But Locked On NFL has everything covered 5 days a week from the best experts on the Locked On NFL network, right? Except for me, obviously. But a lot of great dudes over there, and it definitely helps me keep up with everything going on around the league. But getting back to this move, David, I think one of the biggest moves, obviously, for the Chargers was bringing back Mike Williams on a big deal, right? Especially before we saw some of the other deals that were to come. 3 years, $60 million, $40 million of that guaranteed, and also just paying a receiver $20+ million a year as a number 2 receiver behind Keenan Allen, obviously. So I think this was obviously one of the most polarizing moves. I think we definitely came around earlier than some on, hey, I think you do have to bring him back. And there was definitely some detractors to that. Obviously, bringing him in didn't stop them from going out and making moves like some people thought. Oh, what are you going to do if you sign Mike Williams? How are you going to bring in other great players? Well, you still brought in Khalil Mack and J.C. Jackson. So I think that kind of, defrauded itself in that way. But what did you give the grade for the Chargers being able to bring him back on a 3-year deal?
Well, I was an advocate from pretty close to the beginning of bringing back Mike Williams, just because I understand what he has brought to this organization.
We knew it was a tough decision, right? I mean, that's kind of the thing we battled with throughout, since the end of last season, is just like we felt like they should bring him back, but we understood why it was tough.
Yeah, definitely. Just because the inconsistency that you're looking, or the lack of consistency there when you're having to give this guy top of the market type of money. So, you've had 2 seasons out of the, 5 that he's been with the Chargers that you feel really, really good about what, he brought to the table, right? And I mean, even really just this past season is where everything was, the way it was supposed to look. You had the 1,100 receiving yards, you had the touchdowns, and he was just a much bigger part of the offense too. And I think part of, looking at this deal and liking it is projecting what he's going to be able to do in this offense in year 2. And if that role is going to stay the same, or if it's going to even expand further on. Because, I mean, last year it really was kind of Mike Williams as wide receiver 1, as far as how they were using him.
Sure.
So I like the fact that they brought him back. They said from the organization that they love Mike Williams, that they appreciate everything that he did, that he played hurt. He provided a lot of big plays. I think that's going to continue. He's still young enough. And the biggest component of this is the Chargers can afford it. They can afford to have 2 receivers making $20+ million per season because Justin Herbert is on that rookie contract. So evaluating, giving this particular move I'm going to give it a B. I'm going to give it a B just because of the inconsistency that we've seen so far in his career. We don't know if he's going to be able to replicate this success he had this past season. Obviously, the Chargers expect him to, and they paid him like he is going to. But I have to see it. I have to see it before I can give it a higher grade.
Damn, I didn't think David was going to make me seem like the optimist here. And that's one thing about these grades is this is different going individually than it is grading the entire offseason. Because if we were doing, all of free agency without knowing what could happen, the next few days, there's still big holes that I would have to condemn them on not filling in free agency going into the draft. So going on an individual basis, I just liked all their moves. I ended up giving it a B+. I think he would have been very hard to replace in this Chargers offense. I just think, especially with him coming up in the clutch in the big games he did have, I think you can hope that he might be a little bit more consistent. And it's not like he was in the same system for 5 years, right, and then broke up 1 year. It was like he had this system 1 year, he flourished, and I think that's what gives you confidence. But I really love the Sebastian Joseph Day signing as well, David. The Chargers, after the J.C. Jackson splash, went out and got Austin Johnson and Sebastian Joseph Day. So we'll start with SJD as it is here, leading the NFL in run stop percentage over the last 2 years, obviously last year in very limited snaps due to the injury. But when the Chargers brought him in on a 3-year, $8 million per season, $24 million total, what did you think of that deal? What grade would you give it?
Yeah, I mean, this was a deal that just made way too much sense. I mean, we expected it. I think the connection was there. We understood the relationship between Sebastian Joseph Day and Brandon Staley, and that Sebastian Joseph Day had his best season of his career under the tutelage of Brandon Staley, who ran the number 1 defense that season. So this was a move where it's a concentrated move to attack improving the run defense. And so for that alone, it's an A+. And then you look at the player and the production that he brings to the table when he is stopping the run. It's at the top of the league. There's no one better.
You went out and got the best guy.
Yeah, you said, hey, we had one of the worst run defenses in the league. Well, let's go ahead and bring the antidote in immediately. The best run stopper in the NFL. You brought him in. You signed him to a very cost control contract for $8 million per season. When you see guys like DJ Jones getting $10 million plus per season and other defensive linemen that are not bringing the same things to the table. And also, I think this is a player who can add some pass rush as he continues to play as well. I mean, I think it's going to open some things up because of the 2 guys that are going to be rushing on the outsides of him. But this is a great move. I loved it. This is another player we really had high on our list. They sign him, and it's an A+ for sure.
He's a ferocious player that's going to help you in so many ways. I gave it an A-, even though it was one of my favorite deals, only because of the lack of pass rush. Because the other dudes that are out there that made the $10+ million, right, they're not as good, at stopping the run as Sebastian Joseph Day. But in 1 year with Brandon Staley, he only had 1 sack, right? Last year, he only played 7 games and had 3 sacks, so it was trending in the right direction, and he has more talent on the outsides, but not another guy like Aaron Donald on the inside either to take up pressure. But I still think he could be a decent pass rusher, but I think that's the only thing stopping me from giving this an A+, because you needed run stopping number 1, but another thing you needed to add was interior rushing. And that is something that he hasn't really brought to the table at this point in his career. You could project it, right? And I don't think he's going to be just a dud in that regard. But I think that's the only thing that keeps, from an A, pulls it down to an A-. Still one of my favorite moves. We're nitpicking here, obviously.
Sure,
but
of course.
Quickly, let's get to Austin Johnson because he was kind of the supplementary piece to this. I ended up giving this one a B, David, a solid B grade. Not a lot of pass rush to, talk about. A good run stuffer, but not as elite as Sebastian Joseph Day. Has some position flexibility, can play that nose tackle position. 2 years, $7 million. Maybe a little bit much, maybe a little bit rich for a more one-dimensional, kind of player. That's the only reason I give it a B, but I still think it was necessary.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely another guy that's also a top 15 in run stop percentage out there.
Yeah, among qualified defensive tackles for sure.
Right. And, hey, he had 3 sacks and 21 pressures. So another guy who brings a little bit, but not a lot, right? He doesn't bring a lot of pass rush. The one big thing that really adds a lot of value for me as far as Austin Johnson is concerned is the fact that he's played in every single game for the last 5 years. And that's a huge thing for me.
That should give you a bump for sure.
I definitely always hold that in very high regard.
Such a tough position, too, to do that at.
Yes, it's very physical. I mean, you're literally throwing your body into other men repeatedly. It's very, very difficult. It's very physical, very draining, and he's done it, and he's stayed out there consistently. So just because he hasn't, doesn't bring a lot of pass rush to the table, I think it's a B minus for me on Austin Johnson.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. I mean, and we have to get into more big moves, right? Special teams moves may be underrated. Get to talk about J.K. Scott. Get to talk about Gerald Everett, who I'm very excited about, right? Because I think that's one I'm going to have a good grade on there. But as far as these two guys, like even with an A- grade and a B grade, the Chargers had a big problem stopping the run. And it seems for the most part like they've gone out there and fixed it, or at least should be much better. But if you have an auto part that's broken, the only place you should be able to get it fixed and get the part you need to get it fixed is rockauto.com, because rockauto.com will save you a ton of money on auto parts. And most importantly, it keeps it so convenient to do. You don't have to go to the chain auto parts store, go up to the guy at the counter, have you ask a lot of questions, and have you embarrass yourself because you don't know the answers to the questions if you're me, because that's actually happened to me. Instead, you can go to rockauto.com. In a few easy clicks, you can find your car, find the part that you need, and get it at a great price. Why spend 30, 50, or even 100% more on parts when you could go to a family-owned business at rockauto.com, get a better price, and get it more conveniently? You don't need another headache when you're already having something go wrong with your car. Get a part at the best price, whether it's brake parts, tail lamps, whatever you need, you can find it at rockauto.com. So to see what parts they have available for your car or truck, make sure to go to rockauto.com and check out all the parts they have available for you. Make sure to write Locked On in there, "How did you hear about us?" box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com. All right, David. Well, there are a few more grades we want to get into here, and we can be quick with the latter special teams moves. But there was another big one, the most recent big move, I would say, by the Chargers, bringing in tight end Gerald Everett. And I have a pretty good grade on this. I actually like the move. I know this was something that the Chargers really waited on, and it kind of seems like they just got the dude at the bottom of the scrap heap. I really like the move, and I really like the deal they got on the move, right? They didn't have to pay a premium and pay what some of these other teams, frankly, had to pay $10+ million to keep some of these tight ends. He comes for 2 years, $12 million, up to $13.5 million, with $8 million guaranteed. $8 million guaranteed, that's a high percentage. I think it's mostly just because it's a short contract, only a 2-year contract. But what grade would you put on the latest signing by the Chargers down the offense?
Yeah, I like this move a lot too, and it has a lot to do with his yak ability, the yards after catch ability. I see a lot of that in his game, and I feel like this is an ascending player. I mean, I don't think the stats, they don't pop out at you, right? There's nothing sexy. It was 48 catches, 478 yards, 4 touchdowns.
He has somehow seemed underused in every offense he's been in, right?
Yeah, right. And I think you see, the fact that Jared Cook had 80+ targets in this offense. He's going to come in, he's going to get a lot of opportunities. The Chargers are going to utilize him quite a bit. He's going to get a lot more chances than he has so far in his NFL career.
Yeah,
I can feel very confident in saying that right now. And so, couple that with the contract and the production and the potential for future production, I like this move a lot for the value, especially considering the other tight end contracts that a lot of these other guys signed for a lot more money. I think this is a high upside move. This is still a young player at 27 years old. I love it. And I think the grade for me because of that is a solid B+. I like the move for Gerald Everett.
I had a B+ too, and I'm thinking about bumping it up to even an A- because it doesn't necessarily mean A- means he's a top tier player, right? I'm not trying to sell you on Gerald Everett as a top 10 tight end in the league, but I think especially when you're going out and making the other big moves the Chargers have made, you can't pay everyone a premium. You just can't. Like, there's only so many $10+ million guys that you have on any roster in the league before it's just an exorbitant amount that you just really can't, manage. And Justin Herbert obviously helps with that. But like, as far as the deal, when they got it done, filling in the cracks without having to break the bank, it is, I think, a B+, A- type of move for the Chargers, which I really love because it takes a little bit less stress off of Donald Parham, who's probably not ready to be a starting tight end all the time. And it also complements Donald Parham, complements Trey McKitty and what those two dudes do well. And I don't think this stops Donald Parham from having a really good season or from Trey McKitty taking the next step, because he'll be on the field on certain downs anyways, just because the different dimension he brings as a blocker, maybe not the guy who split out in the slot as much, but he is their most physical NFL ready blocker at this point. And I think that's why I like this move. And I also don't think it messes with the progress of those other two dudes. And even with the Rams, like, it was so frustrating watching them sometimes because he would have really good games. Next week, he's just not on the field, right? And that's the nice thing. He's like, oh, well, what's happening on the sidelines you don't know about? Well, you don't really have to worry about that with this move because Brandon Staley was on those sidelines with that dude in 2020 when Tyler Higbee kind of started coming onto the scene, and he kind of got to see how he handled that whole situation. So he has very good insight on that, even being a defensive coach. But the big move, David, on Monday was the Chargers finding their punter of the future, J.K. Scott from the Packers. So we have to get into some special teams grades because they brought back Dustin Hopkins and also brought in Josh Harris as well. So we'll kind of get into these ones. But I do want to take a second to talk about J.K. Scott because this also means, David, that the Chargers aren't bringing back Ty Long. So when you saw this move and now you're making a grade on it, maybe a little early to make the grade on it, but what did you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I understand why they felt the need to bring in another punter. I think Ty Long, he played admirably, and I think when he had to kick and do place kicking and do field goal kicking and also do punting, I think that he definitely gave everything he could to the Chargers organization while he was playing here.
Well, and let's also not forget how bad the Chargers coverage units were as well. I mean, that didn't do him any favors.
For sure. But the thing is with Ty Long was he wasn't very big distance on his punts. So we didn't really see anything get pinned inside the 20 or inside the 10. There wasn't a lot of touchbacks. There wasn't a lot of that positional stuff that really separates the good punters from the great punters out there in the league. So I understand why they went to make a move here for J.K. Scott. In 49 career games, this is from Chargers.com. He punted 198 times and posted a 44.5 yard gross punting average, which that's unspectacular. That's not, a gigantic
middle
number.
Of the pack. Sure.
Yeah, you want the 48, 49 net average, but this is not something he brings to the table. But hey, this is another guy. I think I expect them to add even more, just camp bodies there to compete with J.K. Scott here. But on the surface for this move, I think it's a C+. I have to see more.
Yeah. I'd probably go C+ as well. I did see Tyler Schoon from Guilty as Charged brought something up, and I had something I had looked up too, which is hang time, which might be something that they're keying in on because that is something where Ty Long and J.K. Scott were very different. I mean, 2020, J.K. Scott was first in hang time. 2018, he was second in hang time. 2019, he was eighth. So that's all top 8 and top 2 in 2 of those seasons. Ty Long, in comparison, in 2019, 33rd. 2020, 32nd, and 2021, he was 19th. So that was the best season he had, was 19th in hang time. And when you're talking about
punt very much.
Well, that's true too. But when you're talking about things that can affect punters, right? Like hang time is really the one thing that shouldn't really be affected by how good your coverage unit is, right? That's something that you can take and kind of separate and be like, hey, you're good at this or whatever.
That's a controllable.
Right. So like J.K. Scott had a terrible net punting average in 2020, but he also had 2 return touchdowns against them. They gave up 2 punt return touchdowns, and he had a punt blocked as well, which is obviously going to murder your averages there. But hang time is important, and that obviously seems like something they're trying to attack here. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and new special teams coach Ryan Fick and bringing in their new guys. But the Chargers also brought back Dustin Hopkins too on a 3-year deal. David didn't break the bank for that one either. What did you make of that deal? What grade would you put on bringing back Dustin Hopkins?
I mean, I think you have to love this move, especially after the carousel that the Chargers have had cycling through kickers the last 5 or 6 years, just trying to find that one person that was going to be able to
you don't want to do that again.
Some consistency. Just show up.
Yeah.
Show up, do your job. And I think, honestly, right away, when you saw Dustin Hopkins kick the ball, you're like, okay, this looks like a professional kicker. The way he was kicking it, the way he was striking it, where it was going through the net at, you had a lot of confidence in the way he was striking the ball, and he did that consistently through the whole season. Of course not. I'm not even going to begin to say that I am an expert on that, but it just looked like
what you're saying.
The way a professional.
It wasn't like he was dinking balls off the pole or having a lot of close calls. I mean, he hit 90% of his field goals in his time with the Chargers. Very small sample size, but you had to love that.
Yeah. So hey, just lock down the position, bring that consistency, continue to do your job the way you did it last year, and I'm gonna love it. So it's a B+ just for getting the position fixed and calling it a day.
Yeah, I have it as a B. I mean, those are the parts I love about it. I mean, I'm going off of his whole career. He's a pretty good kicker, right? That's kind of where he is. He's missed some big kicks in his time, and he missed a big kick in the last game of the season. And we know how quickly it can change, right? He could start off on a tailspin next season, right? And we could all feel much worse about this pick.
Sure.
But like it was Tristan Vizcaino at one point, you know what I mean? So like I really like this move, and it definitely
missed extra points.
Yeah, when he's not worried about someone coming to take his job, right? A 3-year deal is significant for a kicker, but it's still not so much where it's going to totally hamstring you if things fall off the rails. But you're also not going to get potentially a young Waku, Josh Lambo situation where he goes on somewhere else to be much better than he was with you. They're sticking it out. He'll have a chance to grow with the team, hopefully get better, keep that consistency up, and make bigger kicks and bigger moments in 2022 because he did get a game-winning field goal. He has kicked some big kicks in his career as well, but I know that has been one of the knocks on him. I'm a fan of this move, but he's not an all-pro like Josh Harris, who the Chargers stole away from the Falcons on a 4-year long snapper deal, not something you see very often, but an all-pro long snapper. What does an all-pro long snapper mean? What separates you? Because, I mean, I think you can look at Matt Overton this year. How many bad, snaps did he have? 0?
I didn't see any.
Right. 0. So, and so, like, when you're going to do that, it's like, what, difference does it make? Matt Overton was aging, though. So I think the thing here, David, is getting a dude who can also be a part of the play on the punt coverage as well. Getting a dude who can tackle as well as just, also having very good snaps. And this dude led the NFL in special teams tackles for long snappers last season. So you're getting a younger dude, a dude who will actually be able to contribute as far, it reminds me of like a David Binn, right? A dude who's going to get down there and stick his nose in it as well. What grade would you put on the Chargers bringing in one of the best long snappers in the league?
Hey, I like this fit because you have a new special teams coordinator and he's bringing in his guy. Like this is the guy, obviously this is the guy that he wanted. You sign him to a long-term deal. You sign your kicker to a long-term deal and you have some stability in that operation. They talk about having a clean operation all the time with special teams. So bringing in a guy who is literally an all-pro, so that means he was the best at his position in the NFL, I think you have to like the move. I'm not qualified to talk about long snappers. As long as he goes out there and does his job, then I think that you have to be happy with it. So like a guy that's at the top of his position, you got to like the deal. So I got to give it an A.
An A. Yeah. I mean, it's so hard to grade. How do you grade a long snapper? I mean, I gave it an A- just because it's like, I don't know. So I like the fact that they went out and got the best dude there. And I mean, hopefully that means the long snapper is never the story for your team because that's never a good thing. Yeah. And I think that's like, hey, I like the fact that they're trying to get top tier players on special teams wherever they can find it, trying to get an advantage wherever they can find it on special teams. So that's why I gave it an A- on mine, just because it's like, hey, if we can find a guy who's going to even tackle better as a long snapper, we're going to go get that dude and we're going to bring him in. We'll bring in an all-pro guy there. So I've liked the moves the Chargers have made on special teams so far. They're great at bringing in a kick returner is an F because they haven't done it yet. So we'll see if they decide to do that in free agency and, try to fill some of these other drafts or these other big needs before the draft. Because right now, if I was giving the entire offseason a grade, it wouldn't be an A, I don't think, so far, even with all the big moves because of the incomplete part of it. So that is one thing we'll be able to keep talking about this week, though, are the latest moves and potentially some guys out there that can still help because there are still impact players out there that could help the Chargers. But that is going to do it for today's show. To make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel. If you're on here now, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And also thank you to all of our podcast listeners. You can find us on all platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. And if you like the show, please rate and review as well. We really appreciate when you guys do that. It is a nice boost for us. You can also find the show on all of our social media. We post it every day and give our takes to all of the latest Chargers news. You can find me on Twitter at DanTalkSports. You can find David Drogemeyer on Twitter at DroTalkSD. And you can find the show's page at Locked On LAC. We do post the show there always. And you can also find us on our new at Locked On Chargers Instagram page and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. We will be getting into Fan Friday again this week and other fan-related things. So if you want to get your voicemails in, call into 323-524-7924 because we try to get every Chargers voicemail played on the show. And if you need more draft coverage, make sure to check out the Locked On NFL Draft, where you have Ryan Tracy and Eric Crocker breaking things down and getting you ready for the next big part of the offseason. But that's going to do it for today's show. We'll be back tomorrow with the biggest news for the Chargers and maybe some free agent targets that still make sense for them. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.